Story 3. Did the Paris Marathon really lose the plot last weekend? Last weekend, the 2026 Paris Marathon took place without traditional water stations that we've come to expect, with single-use cups and bottles that runners grab really quickly, swig a bit out of, and then throw away as they run to get their record time or PB. An article entitled, quote, Paris Marathon lost the plot with its no water cup policy, close quote, written by Alex Zaire, caught my attention around this. Alex's thesis in this article was that the Paris Marathon's decision to remove water cups from its course to reduce its carbon footprint was misguided. In an effort to be more sustainable this year, the race required runners to carry their own water containers, which they could fill at volunteer-run dispensers along the course. He posited that requiring runners to carry their own water will cause negative issues that include runners might decide not to compete in the marathon because of carrying water or refilling their cups, jeopardizing their target time. People could be thrown single-use bottles by supporters, waiting for them at key points on the sidelines, which could cause hazards and then litter anyway. And some may choose not to carry hydration, and on a super hot day, the marathon could have taken place during may cause medical issues. He also did a back of the cigarette packet calculation that by using this system, we relieve the atmosphere of about 15 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. In his view, about the same as cancelling a 75 passenger return flight from London to Paris. Commentators had plenty to say on this article. Former elite marathon runner and best-selling author Tina Muir landed a few points quite quickly that had been missed from the piece. Firstly, this decision to not have water cups at the Paris Marathon did not come from the marathon organisers, but from the city of Paris itself. It was a requirement, not a choice, prompted by a citywide ban 2 years ago on single-use plastics at all Parisian races. 2, from a safety perspective, carrying your own water bottle, she said, through a bottle or a vest, which doesn't require holding anything at all, can actually be better for safety, and runners can sip their water throughout the race rather than waiting for key moments. Darren Evans, who's the founder of Green Runners, also queried, how do runners hydrate when they're training? He asked. Why should road runners be any different to trail runners? Trail runners have to carry their own hydration, and some of the best in the world are chasing records and PBs just like road runners, he said. People weren't all in favour of this. Ruben de Souza said, my take is for the outrageous entry price of a marathon, they can certainly afford some carbon offset on their own instead of degrading the racing experience. Some people had commented directly on the article as well, people generally who had been involved with actually taking part in the Paris Marathon. Lisa said, I just did the Paris Marathon. Access to water wasn't a problem for me. There was always a water spout available, even in the busiest areas. Peter said, in theory, the idea is laudable, but practically, I think it is more performative. Bill said, my wife ran Paris on Sunday. She's a serious runner, serious enough to have won her age group. She had misgivings about the no-cup policy, but said it actually worked out brilliantly. What you didn't mention, he says, obviously directing this comment towards the article author, was that each runner was provided with a small collapsible reusable cup as part of their race packet. My wife was pleasantly surprised how much easier it was to get water. There are a number of comments that cover different angles that we've referenced here, and there are some additional points as well. Firstly, in regard to what Alex said about the fact that if this is putting off people reaching a personal best or a race time, they might decide not to compete in a marathon. It probably is an interesting point to point out, not for Paris, but for London, a record-breaking 1.13 million people entered the public ballot for this year's London Marathon for, I think, around 55 or 60,000 places. So there doesn't seem to be a shortage of people who want to run. And also another element I want to flag is this optics versus impact. Even if the absolute emissions reduction from removing these cups is modest, these highly visible changes at mass events can normalise new behaviours far beyond the race itself. And that's often what we're talking about when it comes to engaging people around these topics through sport. Often it is symbolic. It isn't necessarily always going to have the biggest reduction in carbon emissions than other areas, but it's somewhere that we can take action and point to. So what one respondent to the article called performative, these changes can get dismissed. But in public facing events, symbolism is part of how norms evolve. We could flag, for example, banning plastic bags or charging for them. These small actions that people are up in arms about initially then become normalized very quickly. We had this conversation on the pod a few weeks ago of F1 changing the way its racing takes place. And I highlighted a number of different changes that have happened historically that had people in uproar at the time that have now become part of the landscape of racing. The reaction to Paris Marathon's no-cut policy shows how quickly a practical change also gets viewed as a binary, good for the planet versus bad for runners. But the evidence so far suggests it's neither that simple nor honestly that dramatic. From reading reactions, the real tension seems to not be about actually cups versus no cups, but maybe about a shift in responsibility. Runners, in some cases, now feel some kind of burden about carrying their own water or cup when they are paying to be part of a marathon race, different to perhaps other training that they take part in. Hydration has traditionally been something that races provide part and parcel without participants having to think about it. They are actually still doing that. They're providing, in the Paris Marathon's case, both the receptacles that you can carry and also the water stations for you to access. But there is a shift, as thin as maybe paper, that hydration is now perhaps moved towards facilitation rather than entire, completely thoughtless, part and parcel provision. So if runners perceive the changes as degrading their experience or unfairly shifting burden, the behavioural signal that we're looking to achieve could backfire in some cases, creating a resistance rather than adoption. However, from what we've seen in terms of the conversations online, that resistance doesn't actually seem to be there at scale. On the ground, what we've heard from reading some of these comments is that many runners report the system worked better than expected, even improving flow at some of those aid stations. And that then weakens the claim that the policy fundamentally breaks the race experience. Mass participation events like marathons are incredible social proof engines. What feels unusual today, self-carried hydration in road races, can become standard very quickly and much faster through sport than through policy alone. I guess the big credibility test is going to be about whether this behaviour sticks. The real measure perhaps isn't only an isolated race day execution, but whether runners keep using sustainable and reusable hydration options, and if we see these policies extending elsewhere. So we'll keep an eye out for that. The three stories on today's climate hat-trick are: energy crisis hits cricket for six in Bangladesh and Pakistan. Cabo Verde's World Cup kit tells a bigger story than football. And did Paris Marathon really lose the plot? That's it from us this week. A couple of heads up. We'll be back next week with our regular podcast, but also we are dropping a bumper bonus episode of the podcast next week on Wednesday, April 22nd for Earth Day. That is going to be a FIFA Men's World Cup 2026 deep dive special, from climate commitments to actions, extreme weather impacts, fan engagement, host city, community and legacy activity, sponsorship and more. I am joined by 10 expert guests for this definitive guide you will not want to miss. So I look forward to chatting to you next week, and have a great week. That's it from us.